Transfer window is open and I'm here to talk about transfers daily. Every weekday there'll be a new transfer video on the channel, and today we're going to start by looking at the goalkeeper situation with a huge update on that, and also whether Newcastle United are going to make a signing before the end of the soft transfer window on the 10th of June. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much to everybody who's continued to like, share and subscribe to the videos and the channel. I really hope you are enjoying the content. I really hope you'll get on board this summer with so much more coming. As I say, I'm planning to do a video every single weekday with transfers and news and opinion all coming your way. So if you haven't already, please do subscribe and hit the notification bell so make sure you don't miss one at all. There is a video that I did last week explaining a little bit of a change. You'll notice the name's changed. There's a little bit of a shift in where I'm looking to go with the channel now. That's all explained in the channel update that I did last week, where we also talked a little bit about Brian Mbeumo and Mark Gahey. But we do have a couple of big bits of information to get into. If you haven't already, do subscribe because it really does help. I'm up to nearly 1,100 already. I mean, I was hoping to get to 1,000 by the end of the season. I'm nearly at 1,100. So many more likes on the videos. Please, if you're watching this, hit the thumbs up. It really makes such a difference, and I really appreciate all your support. Just before we get into this, the way that this is going to work is I'm going to bring you information that I think is relevant or I think is important. A player that I think Newcastle should sign or think Newcastle might sign, we might discuss, but we will not be discussing every single rumour. There are lots of things that fly around, and if I don't feel like it's worth talking about, I won't talk about it. I don't want this to be a clickbaity channel. I want this to be strong analysis. I want this to be something that you watch and get a lot out of. So I'll only bring you information that I deem worthy of the channel, and that includes information that I have myself. Last week I told you about Joan Garcia, the goalkeeper from Espanyol, and whether he was going to go to Newcastle, whether he was going to go to the Premier League, whether he was going to go to Barcelona. He's very much in demand. Last week I told you that if Espanyol got relegated, then his release clause would go down from 30 million euros to 15 million euros, which is roughly 25 million pounds to about 12 or 13 million pounds. They didn't do that. They won on the last day against Las Palmas, who already got relegated, and they've survived. So that is the price, 25 million pounds. And it looks like he's going to go to Barcelona. I wrote a piece for Forbes explaining this, that basically Barcelona has been his preferred destination, or his agent's preferred destination. The Premier League has been a possibility. There's been lots of talk, but the named clubs have always been elusive, and I think lots of media in Spain have jumped to conclusions about who wants a goalkeeper, perhaps. With Aston Villa linked, obviously, Emi Martinez is likely to leave this summer, or at least will possibly leave this summer, and obviously Newcastle, their desire for a goalkeeper is well documented. He's a player that Newcastle have admired, but it was never as far on as a lot of people in Spain were seeming to suggest. Barcelona have always wanted him at that price, and although Espanyol obviously would prefer not to sell to their city rivals, they don't really have a choice because it's a release clause. The possibility is that he will go to Barcelona and then go out on loan. Valencia has been mentioned because they are needing a goalkeeper after Georgi Mamardashvili, a former Newcastle target, joins Liverpool this summer. So that's the more likely course of events. The Premier League it was definitely on the table, and obviously things can change, but it broke over the weekend through Fabrizio Romano and a couple of the North East journalists as well that Barcelona was where he was more likely to go, and Newcastle were never at the table in the way that it was reported, because they are more interested in James Trafford, and we've spoken about James Trafford on this channel for about a year, or well, since last summer. There were bids that went in of around 15-16 million pounds last summer. I think at that point Burnley would have probably dealt at 20 to 25. Now they're probably looking more towards 30 million because of the season he's had in the Championship, helping them gain promotion to the Premier League. He played 45 of 46 games last season. They got 30 clean sheets. His stock has risen so much further than last summer, even though he was highly rated last summer. He had a difficult first season in the Premier League with Burnley under Vincent Kompany, but he really came to his own last year, and off the back of that Euros where Anthony Gordon obviously shone, and there's that clip of Cole Palmer talking about how good James Trafford is. I think lots of Newcastle fans would like to see Trafford come in because he's much better with the ball at his feet than Nick Pope as well. Against Everton, we saw a couple of wayward kicks, and you could see the difference between Pickford at one end and Pope at the other. In terms of the goalkeeping ability, shot stopping and everything like that, there's not much in it, but when the ball is at the feet, there's a huge difference, and it feels like Newcastle are ready for that new goalkeeper. I've obviously made my case that Newcastle need a striker before they need a goalkeeper, but if this deal is there to be done, and it feels like there's a lot of the legroom has been done already for Newcastle with Trafford, he's definitely interested in the move. Burnley are not necessarily closed off to a deal. I think they want the right price. I think they understand the situation. They've been linked with a goalkeeper from Turkey this week, which shows that they may be moving on as well. That's why I think that this one is more likely than Garcia. Garcia looks now set to go to Barcelona. From the people I spoke to last week, his aim is to play in the World Cup in 2026 for Spain, and whether that is more likely at Barcelona, as I say, with Marc-Andre ter Stegen, Wojciech Szczesny, both in there this season. Ter Stegen's coming back from a long-term injury, but he's the right age for them to sort of maybe follow on from them. They're both over 30, 24 years old. It feels like that's a good fit for Barcelona. It would have been a great fit for Newcastle, but that always felt like the most likely destination because it was driven by the agents. That's the crucial bit of information. But it feels like Barcelona have now gained the upper hand on that if they hadn't had it already. And James Trafford is where Newcastle will be mainly looking for a goalkeeper this summer. Probably at around £30 million. Let me know in the comment section if you think that that's a good deal. I think Trafford's a great goalkeeper prospect. He's 22. He's 10 or 11 years younger than Nick Pope, which is a real difference. I think, yes, goalkeeper's going for a long time, and Pope's done a great job and come into his own towards the end of last season, regained his top form because there was a long spell where he didn't look like he was ever going to get back there. The injury that he had, the shoulder problem, was causing problems with his diving at times last season, and I thought that it was fair at times that Dubravka would came in for him, even though I was more of a Pope fan than a Dubravka fan. Long term, neither of them are really the answer, and I think Newcastle do need a new goalkeeper. Trafford is very much Eddie Howe's type of signing, very much in line with what's happening at Newcastle in terms of the power dynamic shift. I wrote a piece on Forbes about that now that Paul Mitchell's gone as well. Obviously, we did cover the reaction, gone into detail on Paul Mitchell's departure and what that means, and James Trafford would be a huge example of that shift coming to fruition. Even though the interest has been there for a long period, I think James Trafford is definitely one to watch this summer. Whether it'll happen quickly, I don't know. And this comes on to the next point as well. The transfer window is open for 10 days or 9 more days. It opened yesterday, and mainly to serve the clubs who are in the Club World Cup, to try and get some players in for that competition, because FIFA wants the best players to be playing in that competition as much as it can. But this is a huge opportunity for Newcastle. Will they act in that 10 days? I'm not so sure they will. I think they'll act by the end of June because it reopens on the 16th. I think they'll have at least 1 or 2 players in by the end of June. That's my gut feeling. I don't know that for certain. I'm just speculating on that. But for me, at the moment, it doesn't feel like they're close to anything. We know with Newcastle, though, that these things come out of the blue. Eddie Howe said in his press conference last week that he wants the club to act quickly. He said that to Yasser Al-Rumayyan just after the Everton game. Whether that's quick enough for the next 9 days, I don't know. Bryan Mbeumo is obviously top target. Mark Gay is obviously another top target. Both of those players are heavily courted by other Premier League clubs. Very expensive deals to do as well. Not the sort of deal you do very quickly, especially when Newcastle's, and lots of people said, well, why haven't they been talking over the course of the season and getting it lined up? And I think it's difficult to do that when you're in Newcastle's position, where it really probably depends from their perspective on whether Newcastle are in the Champions League or not, in terms of them being the favoured club. Manchester United are obviously interested in Mbeumo. Tottenham and Chelsea have been linked with Mark Gay. Newcastle look like they're going to go back in for both. I would imagine, though, that'll happen within the next couple of weeks to 2 or 3 weeks when the transfer window reopens after 6 days of being closed. I don't know why they don't just open it from the 1st of June and keep it open, but that's the reality. I think for me, it'll more likely be by the end of June. Again, don't hold me to that. It might not even happen by then, but there is a huge push within the club, particularly emanating from Eddie Howe, to get things done quickly. If you look back at the summer the last time they got into the Champions League, when they finished 4th in 2022, lots of those deals, 2 massive deals, Botman and Pope, were done by the end of June, I think. So that is where Newcastle want to be. Within the next 10 days, though, I think that might just be a little bit of a push, because the 2 that have been done on a big scale, Jeremy Frimpong to Liverpool and Matheus Cunha to Manchester United, both of whom had release clauses. It'll take some time, but Newcastle will be active, I'm very confident, by the end of this month, and it'll be, they're looking at 2 or 3 really big players. I would say maybe between 4 and 6 would come in, but 2, those positions, right hand side and centre back, are going to be very, very good players this summer. They're going to really be working hard to get those over the line. So at the moment, it feels like Trafford is probably the easiest deal to do. Whether they go for him first, I don't know. But Guehi and Mbeumo are also in there as well. Just quickly before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on Desiree Doue and his performance in the Champions League final for PSG against Inter, and what it means for Newcastle, because they were interested in Doue. They looked at Doue, they spoke to his agent, Mikel Sylvester, and he came from the Rennes Academy, which is where Ousmane Dembele came from. It's also where Eduardo Camavinga came from as well. So that Rennes Academy is very, very good. And Newcastle have got scouts all over Europe. It again justifies that need to be looking at those players and finding those gems and acting on it, because yes, he went to PSG for a vast amount of money, I think 50 million euros or something, but the fact that Newcastle were interested, it means that they've got to be acting on these deals. Nobody was talking about Desiree Doue as being on the level of Lamine Yamal this season or Kylian Mbappe at that level, but suddenly this performance where he absolutely blitzed Inter on Saturday, he's suddenly become a really, really key player. So that's a thing that Newcastle, I think, need to keep in mind, watching those brilliant talents, watching those players, and acting on it crucially, because if not, then other clubs will steal the march, and that's what's happened with PSG. Obviously, he's improved under Luis Enrique, and obviously he's grown as well, and he's become a key player this season. But he was always phenomenal. He was brilliant at Rennes, and he's that sort of player who can unlock a door, and that's what I've been saying this season. He would have been absolutely brilliant in Newcastle's midfield or front line. But that's what Newcastle need to be looking at, I think, just as a little message to them this summer. Go and find those players, because they are out there, and act on it as soon as you can. Thanks so much for joining me. Like, share and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with more transfers. So if you're excited for daily content, like this video and hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.